Hey guitar champion, what's going on? Justin Hombach here, back from my practice cave, and welcome to today's video. In the last few days I was watching and analyzing a lot the Petrucci camp jam from the last Petrucci camp. And there are some phenomenal players in those jams. Jason Richardson, Tony McAlpine, Rusty Cooley, John Petrucci the man himself, Andy James, Tosin Abasi. To be honest, I love Ibanez Guitars and I love Tosin Abasi as a composer, but I don't think that he is such a great improviser and such a great soloist. But this is my opinion. I will say something about this later in the video, but there's one guy jamming with all of them, the one and only Guthrie Govan. And when you're watching through the comments of the video, there are a lot of people saying, man, everybody sounds cool, it's okay, but Guthrie sounds so refreshing and so awesome. What is he doing? And I know what's he doing, and I'm going to share the secret of Guthrie Govan and why you should check out blues guitar. Let's go. These are 4 little tips for you guys in this video, where I'm going to check out the style of Guthrie Govan and the playing of Guthrie Govan and his idea, and compare this to the style of blues guitar playing. Because of all of those players in this jam, Guthrie has a big background in blues guitar. He's not really coming from this shreddy kind of side. He is a phenomenal technical player, of course, we all know this. Guthrie Govan is just mind-blowing, but he comes from the bluesy kind of background, and I think this background makes him so special. And there are some really basic ideas that you can learn from blues guitar playing. My playing has changed a lot when I checked out blues guitar playing. I started as the full shred guy, listening to John Petrucci and Yngwie Malmsteen, Steve Vai, all those guys, I loved them till death. But I never really checked out blues guitar because I thought blues is boring, no technical stuff, not the energy of metal song. And then I checked out blues guitar and it really completely changed my playing. How my phrasing is, how I phrase some melodies, how I play over chord progressions and stuff like this, all based on me going into exploring the world, or the great world of blues guitar playing. And I know Guthrie's doing a lot more in his style. Guthrie is a phenomenal player, but those 4 basic secrets really can bring you to the next level. So let's check out secret number 1. Okay, and the first secret of Guthrie's playing here is he knows how to play over chord progressions. Well, let's check out the chord progressions that Guthrie is playing over in this kind of jam. We have F sharp minor, then going to C major, going to A major, again A major, then I think again F sharp minor, C major, and then B major. So, and why is it important to know how to play over a blues progression for playing over this kind of progressive ambient chord progression? Well, because in the blues we have the basic foundation for this kind of interesting movement in chord progression, this kind of melody movement in chord progressions. Well, for example, let's take a look at the blues in, let's say, E. So we have the chords E7, going to A7, back to E7, and then B7, A7, E7. And if we are taking a look to those chords, we always have dominant 7 chords, and in a scale we usually have 1 dominant 7 chord on the 5th degree of the scale. So we could say that we have 3 different scales to play over in the blues. Yeah, you could say you could play the E Mixolydian scale over the E, the A Mixolydian scale or the E Dorian scale over the A, or the E Ionian scale or the B Mixolydian scale over the B. Well, but then you're sounding like first-class Berkeley guitar student, and you don't want to sound like this. You want to sound cool with the blues, and so we don't use this kind of approach. I will show you what approach Guthrie and all the blues players are using here. Well, it's easier to figure out which notes do we have in this kind of chord progression in those chords, and to see are there any movements, half-step movements going from one chord to the next chord. For example, in the chord E dominant 7, we have the notes E as the root, G sharp as the third, B as the fifth, and the D as the seventh. And in A7 we have A as the root, C sharp as the major third, E as the fifth, and G as the seventh. And there is a bit of a movement from going from one chord to the next chord. For example, we have half-step movement going from the D, the minor 7th, the dominant 7th from E, to the major third of A, the C sharp. Here we have a half-step movement. Or when we're going from the major third of E to the dominant 7 of A, the G, from G sharp to G. And this kind of movement is one of the most important things for the sound of a certain chord progression. In every chord progression we have a melody movement, we have a melody in there, and we have to figure out which melody is it? Where do we have the movement? Where do we have notes that stay over each chord? And where do we have half-step movement, as I've said? And then we should take this kind of movement and apply it into our solo. When we're doing this, we are always on the safe side. We are always sounding on the point, good, and we're sounding like that we are playing with the harmony and with the chord progression instead of only playing scales. And this is something that Guthrie is really aware of, and he knows this from playing the blues. Now, let's go back to the chord progression over this Petrucci jam. And when we're going, for example, from the first chord to the second chord, F sharp minor to C major, there's a lot of movement in here. There's really a lot of movement. For example, we could go from C sharp, the fifth of F sharp, to C. Or we could go from the F sharp, the root of F sharp, to G, the fifth of C. So we can try to apply this kind of melody and idea to our solo when we're changing from one chord to the next chord. And this is something, as I've said, that Guthrie is doing a lot, and there are players like Tozen not really doing it. He's always landing on the kind of wrong note, or a note with a lot of tension in it. And this is another thing. Of course Guthrie is using tensions. Of course Guthrie is using a sharp 11, flat 13, stuff like this. But he always knows how to create tension and how to resolve it back to our root note, or to the chord notes that we have from those chords, to the notes that are sounding good and are releasing it. Tozen, for example, has some really interesting ideas in that, but not really playing over or thinking in this kind of chord melody kind of style. One little exercise for you: take a chord progression, a really interesting chord progression, and write down all the notes from those chords. Write down the root, the third and the fifth, or maybe the seventh, and try to see a bit of a movement between those chords, and try to imply those kind of melodies and those kind of movements into your playing. And when you're going from one chord to the next chord, that you are doing it in your solo, in your melody as well. So the first thing why you should learn the blues. Let's go to secret number 2. Okay, and secret number 2 are those phrases that Guthrie is playing here. And Guthrie is playing always phrases that are rememberable, that you can sing along with, that are pretty easy. Sometimes only consist out of 3 notes, 4 notes, 5 notes, not more, less notes. This is really important here because, of course, Guthrie is using a lot of technical, flashy stuff, but he builds this kind of idea up to a point, and he starts with a simple phrase that you can sing along with. And this is always something that you learn by listening to blues players like B.B. King, Albert King, Stevie Ray Vaughan, all those guys, you learn incredible individual phrases and how to play with those phrases. And this is another thing that Guthrie is doing a lot. He takes some phrases and he builds those phrases up and he repeats this phrase and transform it through the scale or transform it into the next chord, and is playing with those kinds of phrases and those kind of ideas. And it's not only playing this phrase and then going to the next phrase. He tried to incorporate the band with those phrases. There are two moments, I think, where Mike Mangini is playing along with his kind of rhythmical phrase. He's playing something like, and Mike Mangini is going along with him and playing this kind of 3/5 kind of rhythmical idea, or 7/5 or whatever this is. I don't know, I have to analyze it a little bit more, but it's a really cool rhythmical idea. Here it's really interesting in this kind of phrase, and it builds up because he has taken this rhythm and he's playing this rhythm over the scale, and he's playing, or he's implying some melody to this kind of rhythm. So he is playing with those phrases. I've learned this kind of idea and this kind of technique while I was studying jazz guitar and had some lessons with a really great bass player, Sascha Feldman, and he showed me the approach of a bass player for soloing on the guitar, because bass players are way more minimalistic when it comes to soloing and to play melody, and they are playing 3 notes and they are playing a phrase and they are building up that phrase, and this is something that I've learned while those lessons with this bass player. And you can learn this as well by listening to blues guys. But for example, let's go back to the blues chord progression, and let's say you have a phrase something like, let's go back to our E7 blues progression, or blues in E. Let's take this kind of phrase, kind of bluesy phrase, and now we can take this kind of idea where you're playing from the minor third to the major third, the root, the 7, and playing a little bit with those kind of notes, only 4 notes. And we can take this idea and transform it into the A section, into the A7. Going back to E and B. Resolving it. Or you can take this kind of idea and try to stay in this kind of box and try to apply it as well to the chord progression, but just for example like this. E7, going to A7. So something like this. Try to play with those kind of phrases and try to take one phrase and try to play along with it. And don't go to another phrase. Try to force yourself to only play with this one phrase. Alright, this was secret number 2, phrases. Let's go to secret number 3. Okay, from phrases we are going to phrasing. Phrasing is a little bit of a different kind of thing than phrases. Phrasing is the way how we playing those kind of phrases. Are we playing it stiff, or are we giving birth to this kind of melody? I'm playing it with a lot of bendings and vibrato and a lot of expression. And this is something I would say blues players aren't more famous for playing with phrasing instead of any other players on the world. I don't think that you would say, oh, the blues players, I know them for their technical ability. No, you know the blues players because of their sound, and their sound comes from their phrasing. And I think phrasing is one of the most important things that you can learn from blues players, because their phrasing can be really incredible. I have to be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of the vibrato from Guthrie. I'm more kind of a like other vibratos a little bit more, but this is just my personal opinion. But everything else, the bending technique, the slide technique, it's just a thing that gives this kind of playing and solo style from Guthrie so much intensity and so much life, and it makes so creative and interesting. Let's check out one example from the jam, shall we? One example is this kind of line. And Of course you could play it like this. But this sounds a little bit stiff, I would say. And I think that's a really cool exercise to take a melody that you're thinking that is still sounding cool and pretty well over the chord progression, but a little bit lame, and trying to, okay, how can I involve a little bit of phrasing in it? And what Guthrie is doing here for this example, he's doing a pre-bend and release, and then he's sliding to the note half step or full step, I don't quite know right now, but around the area of the note where we want to go to, where we want to land on. And he's sliding to that note and he's bending to our final note. And this makes this kind of melody much more interesting. So try to check out a lot of blues players and try to learn their kind of phrasing. Try to learn the vibrato from B.B. King. It's a really awesome vibrato. Or the style of phrasing and the style of bending idea from Albert King. Albert King is really interesting because he has his strings flipped over, so his high E string is where our low E string is, and this makes his kind of bending idea really interesting because he has a lot of force in his hands to grab those strings and to really bend them really high. And this transformed into our normal 6-string guitar. There are some really interesting, cool ideas in this. So if you want to learn more about phrasing, go and check out blues players and learn the blues. Alright, secret number 3, let's go to the final secret. Okay, secret number 4 is taking a pause and leaving space in between melodies and phrases. And I'm not really the less is more guy, I'm more kind of the more is more guy. But when it comes to improvisation and to playing in this kind of style, I think leaving a pause here and there, leaving a little bit of space, a break, something to breathe is really important. It refreshes your ear and the one of the listener, and that really pumped him away with one shreddy line after the other and one phrase after the other. So this is really important. It makes a huge effect on your playing and on your melodies, but it's not easy. It's really hard for us guitar players to leave space to make a break. Why is it not easy? Well, because when you have a chord progression, it's easier to follow that chord progression by overplaying it. So your hands always know, okay, there's this chord, so I can play this kind of arpeggio, there's that chord, so I can play this arpeggio on this scale and stuff, or this chord note, and so on and so on. It's easier to follow the chord progression. When you are taking a pause and making a break, then you have to rely on your ear, and this is much harder to follow the chord progression. But it's really important, and it's really necessary to train this. So how can you train this? Well, take a chord progression, an easy chord progression, like for example the blues progression, and try to play a melody and then make or a phrase and then make a pause, and make this pause and this break really long, like 1 bar, 2 bar. So your ear should follow the chord progression and really trains it to know exactly where you are in the chord progression. And for this, the blues progression is the best way to start with. Before you're going out in the world of jazz and harmonic complexity, full of modulations and 2-5-1s going there in this and chord range changes and oops. Start with the blues progression. There you have the basics, the simple basic, which brings you to the next level of playing. From the blues progression, start to go to the next level of blues progression. Try another turnaround, try the quick change, go to the Parker blues, and so on and so on. Continue with more difficult and complex chord progressions and train your ear so it can really follow the chord progression and you always know where you are. That's something, for example, I really love the Andy James solo here, but he is really not leaving space. He is overplaying it a little bit, so it's easier for him to follow where he is right now. And another big deal for us guitar players, I know this problem for myself, is when you're leaving a break and making a pause, you quickly think, man, the listener must be bored as hell. I haven't played since 1 bar now. So you fall asleep maybe. damn it, I should play 16-note triplets now, 32-note triplets or quintuplets or whatever, because then he thinks I'm a boring player. I know this problem, it's really hard, but it's so worth it to practice this kind of method, because the listener will thank you. Will thank you that you take a pause, take a time to breathe, for the melody to breathe, and then after some melodies with a little bit of pause and breaks in there, you can build up more and more and more and make the solo more intense, and then you can go full on to play your high-speed licks. Alright, as I've said, there are many more things Guthrie is doing here, of course. His phrasing, the bending, the vibrato, his technique, everything. But I think those basic 4 elements is really important if you want to bring your improvisation to the next level. And if you are bored of your improvisation where you only play shreddy lines and you think, man, it could sound a lot fresher, a lot more like Guthrie. So check out Blues. It's really worth it. This is my tip of the month, of the year, of forever. I recommend this to every of my students. Check out Blues Players, and you will do it hopefully, and I hope I'm going to see you in my next video. If you liked this video, then leave a like, feel free to comment the video, subscribe, and see you on the next lesson. Cheers, stay progress, bye.